Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to go ahead and grade all 30 NBA teams on their 2023-2024 NBA seasons. I'm going to give them a grade from either A to an F, and this will be relative. I'm not just going to give it to them based on where they finished the year. Otherwise, I could just show you the standings. It'll be relative to where they are in their team building. Are they rebuilding? Did they just start the rebuild? Are they in a few years and they want to make improvements? Were they a championship contender? Things like that. So I'll give every team their grade and I'll explain why. We're going to do it in alphabetical order, starting off with the 76ers and ending off with the Wizards. That's by team name. So if you want to find your favorite team, they will be listed alphabetically down below in the description or in the time bar with the chapters. Either way, you can go ahead and find your favorite squad. And let me know what you think about the grade I give your favorite team. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Should it be higher? Should it be lower? Things like that. With all that being said, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And let's get into the grades. Starting off with the Sixers, I kind of go back and forth between a C and a D. I think I am going to go with a C for them, mainly because while, yeah, they were first run exit, which is nowhere near where you want to be when you have an MVP guy in Joel, I do think they would have been able to shoot way higher if Embiid didn't deal with that injury that affected a majority of his season. Maxey emerging as an all-star, all-NBA guy does have a lot of value for them. They now have a real number two next to Embiid. He had some amazing moments in the playoffs, he and Joel both. They just didn't have enough. They were an overall battered roster. I do think also Nick Nurse showing what he can do as the head coach of this team is huge. And now they've got a bunch of cap space. This is the offseason that's going to make or break the Joel Embiid era. We'll see if they capitalize. But for the moment, while this season was definitely disappointing, I don't think it was completely disastrous when you consider the circumstances. Also, they are now freed from Tobias Harris's money, which is a major plus too. Next up, we've got the Bucks, and I'm going to give them a D for their season. They, like the Sixers, had championship aspirations, but they did something a bit more drastic to try and achieve those by making the Damian Lillard trade, which was completely all in. They are pretty much void of all assets. If the Dame thing doesn't work, it's really up in the air what even happens in the future in Milwaukee. And the first year did not go to plan. Dame really never looked consistently like himself. Giannis was ridiculous, had one of the best seasons individually of his career, but you also then had Adrian Griffin getting fired and Doc Rivers coming in, and they never really found their footing in terms of on-court production with either. Their record was good, but it never really matched what you were seeing and what we were expecting from the Bucks this season. They also did deal with a lot of injuries, so I don't think this is worthy of an F, because Giannis, if he's healthy going to the playoffs, maybe things are different. If Dame doesn't get hurt, maybe they beat the Pacers, and if you get everybody back going up against the Knicks, maybe they make a conference finals run. It's a lot of what ifs, so I can't really give them too much credit, but I do think the Bucks are heading into a prove-it season. If Dame doesn't bounce back and look a lot more like himself, and he and Giannis really click, you're in disastrous circumstances in Milwaukee. Next up, we have Chicago, who I'm going to give a C as well. I didn't have many expectations at all for the Bulls. I thought they were going to be a play-in, verge of play-in, but ultimately not making the playoffs team, and that's what they were. They also did something I didn't really like. They made no moves at the deadline. They didn't trade anybody away, which I thought about having that dock their grade a little bit, but because they still do have the opportunity to do so this offseason to make things right, they also had the Zach LaVine injury, which made it harder to go ahead and deal him. There's a lot of reports out there that if he didn't get hurt, he would have been moved. And also you did see Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu really emerge as a backcourt. That was amazing to watch. Kobe was right there with Maxey in MIP contention all year, ends up coming in second. So there were some bright spots, and they do still have a chance to make things right and blow this thing up the offseason. I worry that they won't, and if they don't, then we're going to have a lot more conversations about the Bulls, I promise you that. They might have fumbled a lot of these guys' trade value, but for the moment, we'll see if they make the right decision. I'm just going to leave them at a C. Then we have the Cleveland Cavaliers, who I'm going to go ahead and grade a B. They went ahead and won a playoff series. They stayed afloat in the standings all throughout the year despite major injuries to Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, and Donovan Mitchell also missed quite a bit of time. Jared Allen got hurt in the playoffs. They were still able to go ahead and make the second round. They pulled one win off of the Boston Celtics, which when you take a look at their run is honestly impressive with the injuries they faced. And really the big thing was they had to convince Donovan Mitchell to stay. A lot of the reports are that he is going to end up extending in Cleveland, which if he does, then honestly this goes up to an A season. But because we don't know that for sure yet, I'll give them a B here. Also, I'm sure they wanted to go further than just the second round. It's just unfortunate for them. They ran into the buzzsaw that was Boston. They've got a lot of question marks going to this offseason outside of Donovan Mitchell too. Is Darius Garland going to end up requesting a trade? What do you do with Jared Allen? Do you move him? Do you keep him? Do you try and break up the double big duo? What improvement are you going to see from Evan Mobley, but for this season in itself, I think it was enough of a success, assuming you do end up getting Donovan Mitchell back. Then we have the new NBA champions in the Boston Celtics, and they're getting an A+, the only A+, spoiler alert, that I'm going to give out in this entire video, because they won the NBA championship. I mean, there's not really much else to say. That was my expectation. They met it, but they not just met it, they dominated the entire season wall to wall. From day one, they were the best team in the league. They had the best record easily in the Eastern Conference, hardly lost any games en route to winning the NBA Finals, and this is a team that's set up to try and compete more. They've got everybody locked up long term. Most of the guys on this roster are relatively young. They also did most of their dominance without Kristaps Porzingis in the lineup, and he's a major piece of everything they do. It's scary, especially if you're an Eastern Conference fan, to think about anybody trying to compete with these Celtics. And with them winning the championship, there's nothing else you can give them but an A+. Next up, we've got the Clippers. They're going to land with a D grade as well. This was kind of the make or break season for them. I'm not going to put them in an F because they did have that amazing hot streak for part of the season where they looked like one of the best teams in the league, maybe the best team that got up to the 1 seed. Ultimately did end up coming back down to earth, and Kawhi Leonard ended up getting injured. Maybe if he doesn't get hurt, the Clippers refine some of that magic and they make some kind of run. But this could have been the make or break season. It seems like Paul George may end up walking. Kawhi Leonard's getting older, and at this point, I just expect him to be injured for some major part of the season, whether that's throughout the regular season or heading into the playoffs. I just never expect this team to be at full strength. I've gone on the record that I do think the window is kind of close for the Clippers, so maybe I could put them at an F. But I do guess the James Harden trade was kind of a success throughout the year, and maybe if they're healthy, they make some more noise, so I'll be generous and give them a D. Speaking of teams getting graded a D, I'm going to go with the Memphis Grizzlies here too. Now, this is a team that was completely ravaged by injuries, which wasn't really their fault, so I'm not going to be too harsh on them. The only reason I give it a D is because this was a big season where they could have been competing. They've got a young core, it felt like. They could have made some real noise in the Western Conference. They could just never get guys out there. Now, there are a lot of silver linings, like the emergence of Gigi Jackson, Vince Williams, guys like that, who got more opportunity to show off their skills than they ever would have in a normal Grizzlies season. That's big. So I don't think this was a completely lost season for the Grizzlies. And honestly, in the long run, if those guys become major contributors and they go on to maybe make an NBA Finals or just continue to be a force in the Western Conference, this season might have been a blessing in disguise. We'll wait to see. But yeah, with all the injuries and just the fact that it's kind of a wasted year of their potential window, I'll give them a D for now, but it wasn't really their fault. Then we've got the Atlanta Hawks, who are going to be another team that gets graded a D. Apparently, I've got a lot of teams graded that way. I thought the Hawks were going to be maybe like a 6 seed, maybe a 7 seed, somewhere around that range, a sneaky playoff team that could make things interesting in the first round if Trae Young and DeJounte really clicked. I was hoping we would get some of that in their second full year together under Quinn Snyder. Instead, this was a middle-of-the-pack team the entire season, lost a lot more games than I was expecting. The Trae Young DeJounte Murray duo really never materialized, and Trae did miss a lot of time towards the end of the season, but ultimately, I don't think it would have mattered. This team was never going to make the playoffs. They were never really going to make that much noise. And it's clear that the duo has to break up. A silver lining is Jalen Johnson emerging and being fantastic, and the fact that they got the number 1 overall pick with insane lottery luck, but the number 1 pick thing I'm not really considering because, you know, it's a postseason thing. The Hawks were looking to compete this season. They were looking to improve, and they didn't, and it's probably going to result in the breaking up of their star backcourt. Next up are the Miami Heat, who I'm going to grade a C. I didn't have a lot of crazy expectations for the Heat coming into the season. I figured they would again be towards the back half of the playoff race in the East, and that there was a good chance they were going to be a first-round exit. A lot of teams in the East improved. They didn't really do anything. I mean, Jaime Jaquez was great. Shout out to him. Jimmy Butler was good for some of the season, but was, you know, not able to play in the playoffs because he got injured. Bam Adebayo had a great year, but I just don't really know what else to say about the Heat. They've been the same team, pretty much running this thing back over and over for years now. I think they've got to make some type of significant change to catch up to the rest of the East, because even if they go on these miraculous runs through the conference, it's not going to be enough to beat whoever comes out of the Western Conference because they're just not good enough at this point. I've went on record saying I think they need more. We'll see if they capitalize this offseason, but I mean, relative to my expectations, they did exactly what I was expecting. Then we have the Hornets, who I'm between a C and a B. I think I'm going to go with the C grade, mainly because LaMelo Ball missed a majority of the season with injury, so you didn't really get to see him and Brandon Miller develop as a duo, but Brandon Miller was really good as a rookie. He silenced a lot of the doubters. He ended up 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting. Would have been higher in most years. He just happened to go up against 2 of the most impactful rookies we've seen in a long time with Wemby and Chet Holmgren. They made a deal sending out Gordon Hayward as well as PJ Washington at the deadline, bringing back some interesting pieces like Trey Mann was pretty fun for them a lot of moments. moments. Poku had some time. Micic was interesting. Those guys maybe could all play some type of role on the Hornets going forward. It was kind of just the rebuilding year I was expecting. I figured they'd be bad. They got some good development, but LaMelo was hurt. I think it's all enough to put them right here at the C tier in the middle. Sticking with the grade of C, we have another one, the Utah Jazz. I figured they'd be right around where they were. They finished 12th in the Western Conference. I think I might have had them at 13th, around that range. I had them outside the play-in race. I figured Lowry was going to have another insane season. Was just hoping to see some development from some of their young guys like a Keontae George. He was really fun. Unfortunately, didn't get a ton of Taylor Hendricks minutes this season, who they took in the top 10. Hopefully we see that next year. And yeah, I mean, the Jazz are kind of middle of the pack right now in terms of, are they rebuilding? Are they going to try and compete? Reports are that they want to compete, but they're really far away, that they want to build around Lowry, but that would involve trading some of their young guys, I would imagine. And I do think they have a fun young core. I'd like to kind of see them continue to play this a little bit slower. We'll see what they do. But yeah, the Utah Jazz kind of did exactly what I expected, so C. Then we've got Sacramento, who is going to land with a D grade. I'm disappointed in the Sacramento Kings. Now, I thought it was a realistic possibility that they missed the playoffs. I can't remember if I picked them to make it or not. I think I had them right there on the cusp. So I'm not super surprised they didn't make the playoffs because the rest of the Western Conference did stuff. And they really didn't. And honestly, that's the big disappointment for me, that the Kings at no point really tried to improve this team. They just stood pat. They stuck with it. And sure, there's a lot of talented guys on this roster, but the West is absolutely insane. You had to find some way to improve. They didn't. They missed the playoffs, potentially starting a new streak without making the postseason. They've got to do something this offseason, and if they don't, they're going to continue to get thoroughly outpaced by the rest of the West. Jumping back over to the East, we have the Knicks, who are going to get the first A tier of the video. It was a great season for the Knicks. They dealt with a ton of injuries, which could have derailed them, but they were still able to win a playoff series. They were a game away from winning in the Eastern Conference semifinals and making their first ECF in, I think, around 20 years or so. But the injuries just became too much, whether it was Randall missing a lot of the season, Mitchell Robinson, then Jalen Brunson got hurt in that game, and OG Anunoby got hurt. Their entire starting five was falling apart. Josh Hart, who was still out there trying to play like 48 minutes a night, was dealing with an ab injury. They just could not catch a break this season. But regardless, they showed a lot this year. I mean, if they keep OG in town, if they're able to retain Hartenstein and run this thing back, this is one of the most formidable teams in the East, and I would say is probably the scariest team out of anybody to the reigning champion Boston Celtics. I love what the Knicks did. I love that they went out there and got OG Anunoby, made that big move. Maybe we see something else from them if a star becomes available, but even with this team just going forward, I think the Knicks showed a lot this season that Knicks fans should be really excited about. Next up, we've got the Lakers, who are also going to land in a D tier here. I had the Lakers towards the top of the Western Conference standings. They obviously weren't that. They ended up as a play-in team. They did make the playoffs just to run in again to the Denver Nuggets, who once again had their number, knocked them out in 5 games. It was a highly competitive 5 games, but they do lose in the first round. They have championship aspirations. They want to get another one in the LeBron AD era. It's going to be hard. There were rumors around the deadline that they might make some type of upgrade. I was hoping they would change something up because I think it was pretty clear to everybody the team wasn't good enough. They instead stood pat, did nothing, which I didn't really like. Maybe that was to just wait till the offseason to gauge, but now D'Lo might end up walking. We'll see what happens with him. They've got to try and find some way to improve this roster because it's not good enough. LeBron and AD are getting older. They were pretty healthy this season, which is rare, and they still were not able to be one of the better teams in the West. Honestly, the window might have just closed for this team. Next up, we've got the Orlando Magic, who are going to get an A. Honestly, if I was not just giving out an A+ to the Celtics, they would be in contention for that grade too because they exceeded all my expectations. I had them on the verge of the play-in. I believe I predicted them as like an 11 or a 10 seed. It felt like they were just a year away from making the playoffs, and instead, boom, here they are, and they were 1 game away from winning the first round matchup, which I really did not see coming. A huge improvement from Paolo Banchero. Franz was up and down, but Jalen Suggs stepped up in a big way. They were, again, a ridiculously elite defense. The offense still has a long way to go, which is going to be the big thing they have to address this offseason, but they even had some major injuries, and they were able to stay afloat. There were multiple points in the season where they're hovering around the 2 seed where they felt like they could jump back up towards that range if they got hot at the right time. It was an extremely impressive season for this young Orlando Magic team in just Paolo's second year. Not to mention Paolo himself went berserk in that series against the Cavs. It was really fun to watch. Extremely bright future over there in Orlando, and yeah, exceeded all my wildest expectations. Speaking of teams that get A's, the Dallas Mavericks also get exactly that. This was a great season for them. Luka was right up there in MVP candidacy. Kyrie Irving dealt with some injury throughout the year, but when he got got healthy, he was fantastic. Derek Lively was unbelievable as a rookie, and they stayed afloat up until around the deadline where they made those acquisitions with PJ Daniel Gafford. They found the hot streak at the right moment, and they not only won their first round matchup, they beat the Thunder in the second round. They went to the NBA Finals, where they did run into the Celtics, who are kind of just a juggernaut. I'm not surprised they lost there, but I think this was a great stepping stone. They do need to improve. They have to find ways to continue to upgrade this roster, put more talent around Luke and Kyrie. But those two guys showed that if you give them the right talent, they could be a championship level duo. I'm really excited to see how they build off this next year, because this was a fantastic first step. But the positivity stops for now because the Brooklyn Nets get a D. Now, they were right around where I was expecting them to be this season as an outside the play-in team, but I was not expecting them to be this hard to watch. I thought Ben Simmons would have a bounce back. He didn't. Mikal Bridges didn't really replicate almost anything that he did at the end of last season with Brooklyn. He was not the potential all-star that people were hoping he would be. The team continues to be not good. They continue to not try and blow this thing up. There was a report that they turned down a deal of their draft picks back from Houston as well as Jalen Green for Mikal Bridges around the deadline. If I knew for a shadow of a doubt that they turned down that deal, I'd go ahead and straight up give them an F, because I think that's a disastrous, franchise-ruining decision. The Nets are just a mess right now. I won't put them lower than F because they did finish around where I thought they would be in the standings, but I am so sick of the situation the Nets are in. For the Denver Nuggets, I'm going to put them at a C. They did not repeat as NBA champions. It's really hard to do that in the modern NBA. Basically, it hasn't happened since the Golden State Warriors did it back in like 2018. It's extremely difficult. Now, they did, again, finish as one of the better teams in the Western Conference. That's where I figured they would. They were a game away from making the Western Conference Finals. Jokic won MVP. You had Jamal Murray, who, again, played really well. Aaron Gordon, MPJ, KCP, all had great seasons. Overall, just the depth kind of got to them. And Minnesota was just a really good team that had a perfect scheme to slow them down. And yeah, I don't think it was the season the Nuggets were hoping for. Of course, they wanted to go back-to-back. But I don't think it was a disastrous year. They just need to retool a little bit, add some more depth, keep KCP this offseason, and the Nuggets will again be one of the best teams in the Western Conference because they do still have the best player in the world. Going back up to A grades, we've got the Pacers, who were fantastic this past season. They're one of the teams that I was buying some stock into. I was high on them, but even I wasn't high enough because they not only won a series, they won two and made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. They did end up getting swept by the Boston Celtics, but they gave them a really fun, close series despite Tyrese Haliburton dealing with a lingering injury for basically the entire second half of the year. Siakam, amazing addition. I love that trade when it happened. Andrew Nembhard really started to blossom throughout their playoff run. I'm really excited to see his growth going forward. Guys like Aaron Nesmith and Obi Toppin were big-time contributors. TJ McConnell had a great run. Miles Turner was insane. This team's in a fantastic spot. If they bring back Siakam, they get back Benedict Mathurin, and he shows improvement because they were also without him for a lot of the season. The Pacers are quickly becoming one of the scarier teams in the East, and I'm really excited to see where they go from here. Now we've got the Pelicans. I'm going to give them a grade of C. This was a fun team for a lot of the season. They kind of unveiled Point Zion, which was really fun. He and Ingram stayed relatively healthy compared to previous seasons, but eventually they did end up falling down in the Western Conference. They ended up as a play-in team, lost in their first playing game to the Lakers, ended up facing the Thunder, who they lost to in a sweep. If Zion played, he did get hurt at the end of the season. Maybe the series is more interesting, but I don't think they still would have stood a chance against Oklahoma City. And now they've got to go back to the drawing board. They've got a lot of positives on their side. Ingram and Zion are really good when healthy. You've got fun young guys like Herb Jones. Not only was, again, an elite defender, but this season shot really well from three, which is a massive development. Trey Murphy's really fun. But you've also got some question marks, like do you keep CJ McCollum? Do you try and upgrade from him? Do you bring back Jonas Valanciunas? And reports are that they may try and split up their duo that they've been running things with in Ingram and Zion. Specifically, reports are that they may not want to pay Brandon Ingram, which is understandable with how much he's been injured and did not have a great showing against the Oklahoma City Thunder in the playoffs, although that injury could have been lingering. So yeah, we'll see what happens with the Pelicans, but they're kind of in limbo at the moment. And overall, it was sort of the season I expected, although it didn't really happen the way I was picturing it. Then we have the Detroit Pistons, who I don't think can get anything but an F. They had an abysmal record. They nearly set the record for the longest losing streak in pro North American sport history. It was a complete disaster. This was a year that was supposed to be about growth, development. They brought in Monty Williams, gave him the biggest contract at the time for a head coach ever. Cade was coming back. They just added Asar Thompson. You're going to have another year of development for like Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. I didn't think they were going to be a playing team, but I didn't think they were going to be by far the worst team in the NBA. That's exactly what they were, like a 28-game losing streak. There's nowhere else to put them but an F. I am not really counting this because, again, it's only about the season. But the fact that they fell to the 5th overall pick is just the icing on the horrific cake that they made this season. They did get rid of Troy Weaver, which I think was a good decision. It remains to be seen if they keep Monty Williams or not. It kind of seems like they are. I don't know. I just hope Pistons fans get better this season because what they have right now is a complete disaster. All the teams that they started rebuilding with have lapped them and then some. Then there's the Toronto Raptors, who are going to land in a C tier as well, joining a lot of other teams in this spot. They did some things I really liked this season. They were able to trade away OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam, got some decent returns, saw some fun moments from like Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, the guys that they got in those deals. You've also got the emergence of Scottie Barnes as an all-star level player, going to get an extension, a big one this offseason. And yeah, I mean, they were not very good, which is kind of what I pictured, right around those expectations. Honestly, with the fact that I liked the trades they made, I could maybe even move them up to a B. But, maybe we'll revisit that later in the video. For now, I am going to give them a C. Next up, we've got the Rockets, who are going to get a grade of B, just the second team to land here next to Cleveland. It was a pretty promising season from Houston. They didn't make the play-in or the playoffs like they wanted to, but I think they showed a lot of important growth. Albert Sengun continues to emerge as a really good player, might have been firmly in MIP talks if he didn't deal with that injury towards the second half of the season, but in his stead, when he was out, Jalen Green really blossomed, having easily the best stretch of his career, which is massive. Hopefully he continues that going forward. Great flashes from Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore, Jabari Smith Jr. This is a really fun team going into next season. Also the veterans, so I went on record saying I wasn't the biggest fan of their signings. Also did some good stuff between like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. I still don't know if they're going to be a playoff team next year because the West is loaded. Maybe if they make an acquisition like they say they want to, they will be. But for the moment, I think this is a great stepping stone for this rebuilding team to show a lot of up-and-coming potential. Joining them with a B is another Texas rebuilding team, and it's the San Antonio Spurs. I know it wasn't a great season in terms of team record, but really the one thing I needed to see this season was Wemby to be insane, and he had one of the greatest rookie seasons we've ever seen. Unanimous Rookie of the Year. He was second in Defensive Player of the Year voting as a rookie on a team that was horrific defensively. That's how good he was on that end. He was blocking everybody. He got a 5x5, nearly had 2 in back-to-back nights, was rapidly improving as a shot creator and maker throughout the season. By the end of the year, there were some people saying that they already have him as a top 15 player in the league. Some people tell you he should have been all NBA. That's how good he was as a rookie. It's completely absurd. Also, Devin Vassell had some good moments this season. I like a lot of what we saw from him and some of the other young players. Not crazy across the board development like you maybe would have wanted to see, but the Spurs have 2 top 10 picks. It's not the end of the world, and at the very least, they've got Victor Wembanyama, who feels like he might be the best player in the world within like 3 seasons. But once again, the positivity doesn't last that long because the Phoenix Suns are going to get an F from me. This might seem kind of harsh, but when you consider everything that they gave up for Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, which is literally everything, this team has like no picks forever. It's a do-or-die situation here with this season, and they struggled. They were up and down all throughout the year, could not stay healthy, were middle of the pack, one of the worst clutch time teams we've seen out of any squad that's actually decent in a long time, and in the end, they get swept in the first round. Minnesota was really good. They were clearly the better team, but if you're Phoenix and you trade literally all your assets to make this thing work, to build this big three, you've got to show some kind of promise in the first year. This season did not show me whatsoever that the team that they built can be a championship contender and that Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant can be a championship trio. They're injury prone. There are some redundancies with this team. They've got to find some way to reshape the roster, but they don't have assets to do so. This was, in my opinion, a disastrous season for Phoenix. Then we have my favorite team, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I'm going to put in an A tier. As a Thunder fan, there's really not anything I can complain about. Would have liked them to, maybe make a Western Conference Finals push for the NBA Finals, but the fact that they made the second round as the youngest 1 seed ever, youngest team to ever sweep a playoff series, to ever win a playoff series. Shea was top 2 in MVP. Mark Daigneault was coach of the year. Big improvement from Jalen Williams. Chet Holmgren was amazing as a rookie. Great contributions all over the place. I don't really have anything I have to complain about. This was a phenomenal season. It beat my expectations. I had the Thunder, I believe, as a 6th seed, and there were even some people who said that I was being a homer with that take. Instead, they land the 1 seed. This is just the beginning. They are still extremely young. This was the first year with Shea, Chet, Jalen Williams as your big three together. It's only the beginning. I cannot state how excited I am for the future going forward, and yeah, this was a home run season for OKC. Another team that had a home run season in the West are the Minnesota Timberwolves. They go ahead and get an A from me. I loved what they did this year. They were in contention for the 1 seed all season, barely didn't get there at the end of things, and that's with Karl Anthony Towns missing a lot of year with injury. Anthony Edwards became an all-star, all-NBA, more so level guy after he was an all-star last year. You saw Rudy Gobert win another DPOY, bounce back from being kind of a down year last year. Cat, when he was playing, he was amazing, got an all-star appearance, and they made the Western Conference Finals for the first time in a really long time. Of course, they would have loved to get over the hump to the NBA Finals, but this gave them some experience. Anthony Edwards is only getting better and better. They're still poised for a lot of success. Now, it is concerning because the salary cap situation is going to get extremely tough on them sooner than later, so they may have some tough decisions to make, but just in a vacuum, this was a great building block year and one that showed that this Minnesota team, as currently constructed, can make some serious noise. For the Portland Trailblazers, I'm going to put them at a C tier. I will say I'm a little bit disappointed with some of the stuff that went on with them this season. Like, I was hoping Scoot would be a bit better from the get-go, but the team was kind of ravaged by injuries, which led to him not having that much talent around him, whether it was Simons being in and out of the lineup or Shaedon Sharpe or DeAndre Ayton. Everybody seemed like they were hurt at one point or another. I mean, Robert Williams played 6 games and then missed the entire year pretty much. Malcolm Brogdon didn't play a lot. This was a rough year for Portland. They did see some growth from some of the young guys, and I think they still got something interesting brewing over there. So maybe you could penalize them because they didn't really get exactly what they were looking for in terms of the growth and the play of their young core, but it's the team that just traded away arguably the best player in franchise history. This was the first year of a rebuild. I wasn't expecting much. I'll give them a C, although it is rough for them. They fell to the 7th pick, but they do have 2 lottery selections. I'm excited to see what they do with those. Heading into the final 2 teams, we've got the Golden State Warriors, who I'm going to give an F for the season. This might seem a bit harsh. Let me explain. The big thing is, of course, they didn't make the playoffs. They were supposed to be a playoff team. I predicted them to be, so a lot of people did as well. It was not that at all. They were hanging around the play-in race pretty much the entire season. They started off pretty decent, but then quickly fall off a cliff. The Chris Paul signing didn't really work out. Draymond was punching guys and got suspended. Steph Curry had a pretty up and down year, specifically towards the end of the season. He really did not look like himself. You had Klay Thompson never really find his footing that much, to the point where he got benched at one moment and just couldn't be relied on as a second option. Andrew Wiggins has continued to fall off a cliff since he was an integral piece to them winning the title in 2022. Honestly, just a disastrous year. And the first time they don't make the playoffs with Steph, Klay, and Draymond all pretty healthy and playing for a majority of the season since like 2015. So that's not a good sign if you're the Warriors going forward. Not to mention, maybe the biggest sin of all, they did nothing at the deadline. They stood completely pat with this team that wasn't good whatsoever. Maybe there wasn't anything out there, but it feels like there had to have been some route to improve. They didn't. And when you have a guy in Steph Curry who's a top 10 player of all time, or right around that range, and the best player in franchise history for sure, you have to find a way to help him compete, even if you sacrifice some of your long-term potential. In my opinion, they didn't do so, and now I've got no idea where they go from here. And finally, for the Washington Wizards, they're going to get another C. I feel like I put a bunch of the rebuilding teams in this C spot, but they kind of just, again, did what I expected. They were bad. You saw some fun stuff from young guys like Bilal Coulibaly. I really liked him going to the draft. Showed a ton this season. Deni Avdija took some leaps. Kuzma was pretty good. They can maybe deal him at this deadline. They dealt away Daniel Gafford. I like that they continue to trade their top pieces for some assets. And yeah, really the big thing that gives them a knock, it maybe doesn't allow them to go to like a B tier, is the play of Jordan Poole. He was not good at all this season, a massive disappointment. Some people thought he could win MIP, he could be like in all-star conversations, or at least, you know, just kind of have a bit of a resurgence. Didn't happen at all, and now they've got that big contract on their books, which, if he doesn't improve, might just be untradeable, or at least one of the worst contracts in the NBA going forward. They did land the number 2 overall pick, which is cool. We'll see what they do with that. But yeah, overall, just kind of what I was expecting from the Wizards, with some bigger positives and letdowns. But yeah, with all that being said, these are my grades for the 2023-2024 NBA season. As I said earlier in the intro, which felt like forever ago, I think this is going to be a bit of a longer video. I guess we'll have to see once I edit it. But let me know what you think about the grade that I gave your favorite team. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Should it go higher or should it go lower? What are some other things I maybe didn't consider? And let me know what you're expecting from your favorite team going into next season. Now that this year's wrapped up, I'm really excited to see how the offseason goes. A lot of content surrounding that coming throughout the coming months, so be sure to subscribe subscribe if you want to see that. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Hit the notification bell as always so you don't miss out on future videos. And yeah, I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.